It's Voodoo 51292's Top 10 Games of 2011. My personal picks for the best 10 games of the year. Well, everyone, it's that time of year already. It's time to take a look back and reflect on all of the games that I had an opportunity to play in the year 2011, and for me to choose what I thought to be the top 10 best games of 2011. And 2011 was certainly an interesting year. We had an opportunity to play a lot of really good games, and unfortunately we had the displeasure of playing a lot of really crappy games. But I think after a lot of thought and deliberation that I have come up with a pretty good list of what I feel to be the best 10 games of 2011, the cream of the crop, so to speak, of the year. And before we begin our actual countdown of these games, there are a few ground rules that I'd like to lay down and get out in the open just so that everybody's on the same page. Just some rules to think about when you are watching my countdown so that you don't get confused. So, without further ado, let's start off with rule number 1. For me to actually rank a game in my top 10 games of 2011, I obviously had to play the game. And the reason I say this is because there were quite a few games this year in 2011 that apparently were very good games. But unfortunately, I just didn't have the opportunity to play these games, even though some of them may have actually made it into my top 10 games of the year. And some of these games would include things like Catherine, Shadows of the Dam, Deus Ex Human Revolution, Zelda Skyward Sword, and many more. And whether it was just because at the time I wasn't interested in the title or because of my busy schedule, I just didn't have an opportunity to get around to playing these games, unfortunately, I wasn't able to play them, and so they cannot be in my top 10 games of the year. Rule number 2. For a game to be in my top 10 games of 2011, obviously, the game had to be released in the year 2011. And the reason I say that is because I did actually do quite a bit of gameplay from games this year, whether that have been Call of Duty Black Ops or Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, games that actually were released in 2010, but I did all of the gameplay in 2011. So obviously, since those games were not released in 2011, they cannot be in the countdown. So, rule number 3. Ratings don't matter. And what I mean by that is that just because in my official game reviews I may have given one game a higher score than I gave another game doesn't automatically mean that it's going to be ranked higher than that game in my list of the top 10 games. Remember, this is me taking a moment to think back on the entire year and think back to all the games I've played and making a decision about which games really made a lasting impact for me. And in the long run, a game that I may have given a higher score than another one may not have made quite such a long impact on me that I think that it's better than the other game. So just keep in mind that the scores I gave out in my game reviews do not actually determine the order in which you will see these games appear. And finally, rule number 4. This is strictly my personal opinion of what I feel to be the top 10 games of 2011. And I understand that everyone has their own opinion, and that's perfectly fine. And actually, I would encourage you, if you do have a different opinion on what games should be possibly ranked higher than other games, that you respectfully let me know in the comments, because I'd be interested. But just keep in mind that this is my personal opinion, so there's no reason to be mean or hateful or call me names simply because you don't necessarily agree with my countdown. Just understand everyone has an opinion. This is mine, and just please be respectful. Alright, so since we've got all the nitty-gritty work out of the way now, it's time for us to actually begin our countdown of the top 10 games of the year. But before we begin the official countdown, there is one honorable mention game that made its mark on me. So coming up next, the honorable mention of 2011.